Hey friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and I've been on a little bit of a roll with the Sola Busca. Now mind you, if you're watching these videos on the Sola Busca, these are entirely my own observations, and if someone commented, and I thought their idea was helpful, I give them credit. But likewise, bear in mind that nothing that I'm saying is the truth necessarily, it's just my own observations, because I've learned through the years it's by having the benefit of so many decks that I am able to look at so many decks and compare them, so that by the time now I'm looking at the Sola Busca, I have a little bit of a background upon which I could try to base some of my ideas, plus whatever I'm able to find on the internet, as far as Latin names or Latin references. And in my last video, one of my viewers, Miron Alexandra, and I like to give credit where someone points me in the right direction, suggested that I watch some videos by Mary Beard, B-E-A-R-D, because she has some videos on the Roman Empire, and she touches on all kinds of aspects of the Roman Empire. And so I watched one just now. I'll watch more, but I just watched one, and it was interesting. I think the title of the one was "What Caused the Roman Empire to Collapse?" And nothing is that simple. Nothing is so super duper easy to say this one thing did it. But the fascinating thing that I walked away with was that when the Roman Empire started to sense that their hold on the physical land was maybe that it couldn't spread any more than it already had, when it reached its limit, the one thing they took hold of, and they saw an opportunity, was to get into our heads, and that was with Christianity. So when they started to see that this young man started capturing the imaginations of folks, and that he was spreading an attractive philosophy of life, Jesus Christ, they hitched their wagon to it. They killed him, but then they hitched their wagon to it, which kind of, interestingly, is what kept their hold, because they got into our heads. The Romans had a grip on the land, but when that started to become less and less, they found the next stronghold, which was to get into our heads, and they managed to do that for a few thousand years. And I think it's very interesting. The reason I'm pointing this out and I'm mentioning this is because of the final card with Nebuchadnezzar. Now, of course, this was in 1491 when this card was designated as the final card in the Triumph Order. But the Roman Empire culminated with the New Jerusalem, which sort of bears out what I just mentioned, which was, I think, the observation that Mary Beard made in her documentary that I just watched. Very interesting stuff. Okay, so the next video on the Sola Busca, I mentioned I was going to compare the pips between one deck to the other, my two Sola Busca decks, which is the Illuminating Ancient Tarots, which was published in '95 by Sola Busca and has since been out of print, and comparing it to a more facsimile deck, which is the Cherokee Sola Busca, also published by Los Scarabeo, this time in their Anima Antiqua series. I don't know that it's out of print. There were 2,999, and I have like 1,273. And I've had it for a couple of years. So how long have I had it? I got it when it came out in 2017. So since 2017, maybe it is also out of publication. I don't know. But there are now a few Sola Busca publications that you can get your hands on. At the time when I bought this was the only publication available that I was aware of. And that's why I bought it, because it was the only one that I was aware of. Okay, at any rate, I also think, if it's appropriate, that I will show, when we come upon some of the pips that are reminiscent for some of the viewers, some of you viewers who are more familiar with the Rider-Waite-Smith collaboration, you'll see that there are some cards from the Sola Busca which definitely, without doubt, inspired Pamela Colman Smith. And I'll show those, I think, as we come upon them. Now, the deck that I'm showing, the Pamela Colman Smith deck that I'll be showing in collaboration with Arthur Edward Waite, is the one from 1910. And as far as I know, this is the closest collaboration to the 1910 publication that exists. There was one since then, but I believe Miss Jensen, if I understood her correspondence correctly, and she contacted me about a year and a half ago, said that she still believes that this is the most accurate 1910. And this publication was by Conrad Stain. Well, anyway. Well, my primary focus is to compare both of these publications, one to the other, and then just show the Arthur Edward Waite, Pamela Colman Smith collaboration when it's appropriate. So here we have the Ace of Swords. So we do have a hand holding it. It's interesting. We have two individuals holding this sword. The MS. Oh, you know, I do remember looking up MS, and now I don't remember what it was. Darn it. But we see MS a lot. So there's arrows shooting up, or those could be birds, I don't know. Now we clearly recognize this card, right? I think sometime around like 1907 or 1908, or it might even have been 1909 when this deck was created, that the British Museum, excuse me, had on display. I don't know if it had the entire deck on display, but had various cards from the Sola Busca, or black and white photographs of the Sola Busca on display in the UK. And so clearly Pamela Colman Smith, saw the deck, or saw the photographs. And so clearly the Three of Swords of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck was inspired by the Sola Busca. And this is an image that would stick with a person. Now here, this vessel is almost like an umbrella stand for the swords. And not to dull the sword tip, I guess, they come through the bottom. So they don't rest on the bottom of this thing, they come through. Kind of an interesting thing. Now here, the detail we lose is that these berry type things are not connected with one another. But here they're connected one to the other. And they're also connected to this vessel. And, this could be, an alchemical reference, which is lost on me. So now we see the 6. And we see someone who looks like they're burdened, which is not exactly, which kind of, I wonder if the picture didn't stick with her, but maybe the thought of what some of these cards carried, you can't help but have fill in the blanks of a story here, right? I mean, a picture says 1,000 words, right? So, although the pip cards of a typical historic Italian deck, just as pip a number, it doesn't necessarily have a story, so it didn't necessarily have a meaning. But I can't help but wonder, these cards tell a story. So I think Peter Mark Abrams makes a case that the deck was a grimoire, thereby being a roadmap for magical purposes, to inflict harm or whatever on their enemies, or, that's a fascinating idea, and he could be very well correct. But I wonder if more simply than that, if they were using the cards for divinatory purposes. I mean, only their family would have been privileged to see these cards. These cards weren't known by anyone. For hundreds of years, they were just kept in the family. And you would think that maybe the only people who really ever played with these cards, because they're such in pristine order, were the people who had them created. They were passed down from generation to generation in the family, but that doesn't mean that the families continued to play with them. They might have just been an oddity heirloom. But maybe they actually did use these cards for cartomantic purposes. Not necessarily as a grimoire, but for fortune telling. I mean, they ended up being used for divinatory purposes. And even I think earlier than the occultists, and I've said this a number of times in many of my videos, it's just because the occultists came out of the closet and said these cards can be applied to divinatory purposes. Doesn't mean little old ladies in Italy and France weren't already doing it. But at any rate, here we have someone who seems like they're burdened and they're traveling. And it's not the same image, but the sentiment seems to be similar, right? A person who's leaving troubled waters and going someplace else. And tell me if these aren't reminiscent. Here we have somebody who doesn't look troubled. Looks kind of like the cat that swallowed the canary, right? And look what we have here. So we can't say she lifted this for this, but there still seems to be a similarity, right? In the posture of the leg, of the movement, of taking from a source. Now here there's 3 left in the bin, which is attached to him. There's 3 left in this pouch or whatever this is, but it is attached to his waist. And here there's 2 left behind. But here we can't make that claim or anything like that. It doesn't even seem similar. does the 9. I mean, this 9 is quite different. And the message doesn't seem to be the same. Now here, with the 9 of Swords, excuse me, the 10 of Swords, I believe we see that image in the 10 of Clubs, right? And tell me, the 10 of Clubs in the Arthur Edward Waite Smith packet has not been inspired by this card. Now, why she chose it for the batons rather than the swords, she chose a different suit. But there's an uncanny parallel here. And then the card she did create for the 9 of Swords, we should see what she did for the 9 of, what the Sola Busca deck did with the 10 of Swords, to see if she switched them. Now here we have the Page of Swords. And we have someone who's youthful and involved with music. The shape of the tree is quite different between the two decks. And I should be more assertive about these things, but if you do appreciate my videos and, my observations about things, I do appreciate your support, to give me a thumbs up. They really help, to share me, to subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, to make sure that you get my videos. You never know what I'm going to say that might be interesting, might be interesting. And I wouldn't mind at all if you bought me a cup of coffee or you gave me a super thanks every now and then, because these decks are very expensive. And I don't hoard them. I share what I know and what I learn and what I discover. And I think I've taught many people about these cards. And I've exposed a lot of people to cards. And I've helped a lot of deck creators, I think. But mostly I think I was a teacher. That's what I did in my Muggle life. And so once a teacher, always a teacher, right? And so my natural inclination is to share knowledge. So if you could support this channel, I don't want to have to make it a Patreon kind of thing where subscribers have to pay, but I don't mind tips. So here we have Olympia for the Queen of Swords. Now we need to go down the rabbit hole of who Olympia was, right? And the King of Swords. The Romans made it, or the Sola Busca made it a point of identifying the King of Swords with Alexander. Now notice that the recreation deck does not put his name up there. moving on to the Ace of Cups. Now in the Arthur Waite Smith, it's more like a chalice with communion, and the dove is very religious. It's very Catholic. But it does not seem to have been one of the cards inspired by the Sola Busca. Again, all the MS. See, I know the MS means something. And I just read about it yesterday, and now I don't remember because it didn't stick. But I'll put it down below once I figure it out. Oh, and that reminds me, you should always read what I write, because I sometimes will clarify something that I forgot to say, or I do usually have good points to be made after I do a video, because I won't redo a video for a minor mistake, because it's a lot of time involved. So here we have a putti with a bowed instrument like a violin, but not quite. Is that a lyre? I don't know. No, it's not a lyre. I don't know what that is. Now, if it didn't have the two, and I didn't realize it was the two of cups, I'm not sure that I would understand that this was the two of cups. I might have thought it was just one elaborate urn. But the first card, the first ace, a little confusing also. So in the facsimile deck, we have more of a cloud underscoring those two, which we don't have in the recreation deck. So if it was just intended to be a card game, you wouldn't need illustrations, because you would just need the pips to say 4 cups, right? So why did they bother to put illustrations that you could read or understand? So I won't go so far as to agree that it was a grimoire, because I don't really know that it was, but I'm wondering if they just didn't have sophisticated parties with their rich friends, and maybe after they played a game of tarot, maybe they did some divination. Now, is this stealing? Is this stealing these things from a shelf, or are they taking from the bag and putting it on the shelf? And not that they're stealing, but are they? And the sack has seen better days. So the sack is worn and torn. Interesting. And one thing I'm noticing is that these things are connected in some cases, not here, with like a cord. Now this one at the top, this one that's on his body, does not appear to be part of the rest of these are attached or linked with a cord. Now, not that it's exactly the same, but I can see that this could have been an inspiration for this. Because these vessels, at least these, have something sprouting from it. And we have an individual in the middle of it all. It's not, by any means, it's not a copy or anything like that. But I wonder if it might not have been an inspiration. I mean, Pamela Colman Smith was a very creative person, and I think she picked up on things clearly. And I think she made connections between things. Now this card almost looks like chaos, doesn't it? Like these little pooty are into some mischief, dropping these things. In contrast to this card, which the cups are very orderly. Now, card that many people see as a wish fulfillment card, the 9 of Cups. So we have a serpent kind of man, beast from the sea, who's coveting or collecting these vessels. He's got a bit of an elaborate tail. And it's not at all related to this card. Interesting card. You have the 10 of Cups. Interesting, in the facsimile, the gentleman, his eyes are askew, and here they're looking more direct. So I do appreciate having the facsimile deck. And we have the Page of Cups. So what's missing from this, or we see it extremely faintly from the recreation deck, is that there's some kind of magic, some kind of energy being released from this pot, this teapot, or whatever it is. He's got some kind of sack, either of stones or whatever, money, jewels, or is that a tassel? That could be a tassel. So the Knight of Cups has wings. And the gesture of the head of the horse is a little reminiscent of the gesture of the horse here. And he doesn't have wings on his body, but he does have wings on his helmet. Who knows if there was a little bit of inspiration drawn from this card to this card. And I don't know which of the Sola Busca cards were on display in the museum. I don't know if they all were, maybe just a few were. Now, I definitely think that this queen was inspired by the Sola Busca Queen of Cups. The head posture is very similar. There seems to be reference to the sea creature. And there is reference to her cape almost becomes the sea, almost becomes the ocean, right? There's even a similarity in the elaborate nature of the cup or the chalice or whatever it is that she's holding. And here, whatever is coming, oh, is that a snake? Now in person, this looks like a snake. But that's not drawn as a snake in the recreation. So that's, again, another case in point for why it's really good to have facsimile decks. Because that really looks like it could be a snake. Wow. That's really something. It's a very cool deck. It's a very cool deck. I'm sorry that I never really, I guess I was intimidated by it, or I was just like, I don't understand this deck, but I think I'm going to be watching a lot of Mary Beard videos on ancient Rome to try to put the story together, particularly regarding the Triumph cards. And to see if I can't crack the code for myself. It may not be the truth. Even any of our thoughts about even the regular tarot deck, which doesn't seem to be shrouded in as much mystery as the Sola Busca. We think we know some stuff, but we could be completely wrong about it. Anything that we know, right? Because the best we can do is just use our own observations and our own common sense, or take pieces of information that someone else mentions, and if it makes sense, give them credit, right? But also, apply it if you can and disregard it if you can't, I was going to make a point, but I can't remember. Okay, so now we're moving on to the batons. So here we have the Ace of Batons. Two batons. Now, the interesting thing I noticed about this was that, well, first of all, this guy looks kind of on the dumb side. He kind of looks Neanderthalish or something, He looks like he's not the sharpest tool in the shed. However, he's got a small member, but he's got huge. You know what I'm saying? So I wonder if this card represents a certain kind of dumb dumb bravery, somebody who's dumber than a box of hammers, but has the nerve of a bull, But that's not at all the story I get with this card. But that's not to say that this card wasn't inspired by another card in the Sola Busca. Now here again we have another card that's kind of similar to the Three of Swords, and that we have 3 of these batons piercing the head of an individual. It's quite different from the image we have there. And like I did with the Triumph cards, what I really should do is lay the suits out in a row to see how they respond to one another in a sequence. So this video is comparing the 2 decks, but what I'm going to do in my next video, if you guys will bear with me, is to do each suit individually lined up to see how they interact with one another. Now we see a gourd or something. So this individual seems to be similar to, was it the 5 of Swords or the 7 of Swords? That was sneaking away. Right? Oh, I hate when that happens. My apologies. Yeah, my camera's a little top heavy, I guess. Oh my goodness, so sorry about that. I'm kind of discombobulated over here. Okay, so we're on the 5. Okay, I mentioned that there's like a gourd here. And that he's carrying a bit of a burden. Now with the 6 of batons of the Rider-Waite Smith pack, we have a real sense of victory, right? A parade, a celebration of sorts, an accomplished thing. We don't get that sense here. So his undergarments are falling off, which probably told a story in itself. We would have recognized. And we see a lantern. Isn't that interesting? Huh. So the clubs, or the batons rather, seem to be a suit of burden, don't they? Seem like one after the other all seem to have, you know, a burden, a weight to carry. So we have batons resting in a bucket, similar to the 5 of Swords, where the swords were all in a bucket and they came out the bottom. Do you remember when I was talking about that? So these are at rest. I guess it could be argued that these are at rest or coming to rest. Or are they being thrown? But they're not, and there's no ambiguity here. They're resting in the bucket. This guy's protecting what's his. I guess it could be argued that so is this guy, protecting what's his. Could this be a woman? I don't know. Did I do that wrong? 9. Okay, 10. I guess I did do that wrong. Oh, 9. Did I lose my 10? I lost my 10. My 10. Hold on. Okay, I figured out what I did with the 10 of batons. I put it with the 10 of swords when I compared it to the 10 of swords. So these are just collected and put in an umbrella stand. But they are not, unlike the 5 of swords and the 5 of batons, or whatever that one was, they're not coming out at the bottom. So we have another page with a little bag of something. Could be money, could be pebbles. And the only similarity, I guess, is that this page has a hilly, maybe the hilly landscape of the Sola Busca served as an inspiration for the pyramids, although it could be a real stretch on my part. Here again, we have those kind of pyramidal little shapes there, reminiscent of a pyramid, but are pyramids here. But that is about all they have in common. Palace or palace. Now here there's like a DP, which is missing in the recreation deck. Here they did a better job of imitating this clouds, which in other cards, this deck faked the clouds a bit, but this one is a more truthful rendering of the clouds. And the king. So they take away the name in the recreation, Levio Plator. Plator? They remove that reference. Now, had I been really smart, I would have looked up all these cards. Right now, all I'm doing is comparing them side by side, and on occasion to the Arthur Waite Smith deck. But the next video, if I do another video, it will be more in depth after having watched more videos on ancient Rome, you know, trying to piece together some of the things that happened in ancient Rome, and then trying to clue them into some of these triumph cards and some of these other cards. So this is saying servir, Schiffer ever. Yeah, I'd have to look all that up. So they almost look like coins here, but they are referenced as discs in the Lo Scarabeo recreation deck. But they kind of look like coins. Now, these two coins are linked together, or whatever they are, linked together. Now here's a case in point where the image is completely different in the Rider-Waite Smith, but I'm wondering if the essence of it isn't the same. Now here we have somebody, a woman who, now she's a full-figured woman. That might have been what they considered beautiful, I don't know. But if anything, a full-figured woman, means she probably indulges in good food, right? And she's collecting. It looks like she's not dispersing of things, she's collecting, right? So here we have the image of the Four of Pentacles, where he's kind of hoarding. So was the message of this card an inspiration for here? He's a man of the world. We see the city behind him. And for a woman to be that large meant that she had access to food, so she was probably a woman of the world herself. These could be stretches on my part, and they probably are. Now this is a really interesting looking thing. This is like a person who turns into a bird. And it's almost like one of his wings is a shield. And then he has a hand coming. So is this like a bird cloak? And he's really a human underneath it? So this is a rabbit hole to go down, right? To figure out this. So we see like the construction of the table is not evident here. Now look at this card. I'm going to skip a few in the Rider-Waite Smith. But look at the Six of Discs. Is it not reminiscent of the Eight of Pentacles? And the Six of Pentacles really has no similarity. Now here we have the youth again. And the bird who's almost his size. So I wonder if these two are in some way connected to, what was it, the Five? Yeah. Huh. So this is the perch for the bird coming out of this chalice, which houses or holds all these discs that are neatly tied up and wrapped around with wings. Very interesting. Do we have a reference to a skull and crossbones? So there's a lot of birds in this suit of batons. I wonder if they're, I'd have to go study some more and just, try to see what the references might have been. So somebody's in flames. Somebody's body is serving as, wow, as the fuel for the disc barbecue. Wow, that's interesting. Has nothing to do with the message we see here. And 10. So in a sense, it looks like, like a hope chest or a chest where, family artifacts might be kept, right? Like a chest, right? Could it have been the inspiration for a card that could suggest the same thing? The old man who's earned or achieved this, and he's passing it on to the next generation. Could it be? I mean, we do have a dog here, right? That looks like a dog, or I'm not sure what that is, but I think it's a dog. We have dogs here. So in her own way, could Pamela Colman Smith have been inspired by the idea of a family heritage, passing something along, opening like the treasure in the attic, the chest in the attic that has like all these goodies from somebody's ancestry? I mean, could it kind of be the same thing? One generation leaves for the next. You barely see him because they're very prominent, but they're the promise of the future, right? This is what he's achieved, but they're the future. Very interesting. Oh, okay. More birds for the page. And again, the page has either a tassel or a sack of something. We see that for all the pages. Now, unlike the Knight of the Rider-Waite Smith pack, this Knight of discs is not standing still. And he's full, he's moving right along. This guy is more sedentary. We don't see his face, but we can see the intent in his eyes. And the intent in the original is far more intense than the intent here. Here he looks like he's fallen asleep. But here he's looking forward. He's got his eye on the prize. He's determined to get there too. Wow. The Queen, she looks like she's grooming herself. Maybe looking at her reflection, or you can't really see it very well if it is. Elena. And we see some vegetation around her. Not as opulent as the vegetation around this queen. And the last card is the King of Discs, referencing King Filippo, whose story is worth looking into. It's possible that his reign was one of peace. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if that's what the message is of this king in this card. His reign maybe was one of peace. Be worth looking into, again with the birds. Okay, so I hope you think that was fun. I thought it was fun. There's a careful look side by side with the recreation deck, but also with the Rider-Waite Smith deck to see see if we can catch any of the inspiration cards, and also just to really take a good look at the Sola Busca. And this probably isn't the last video I'll do on the Sola Busca, but I'll probably refrain from doing more until I've watched more videos on the history of Rome and got more of my bearings. These first 4 videos that I've done on the Sola Busca, this will be the 4th, are more my raw observations, just things that I've come up with just by looking at the cards, just by using what few resources I had, like Google Translate, or even just looking up names of emperors that might have been referred to in the cards. But moving forward, I will be doing more research with other resources, like the Mary Beard channel. I'm going to check her out and apply whatever I can learn to these cards. And I have a feeling that when I'm done, I'll be able to use these cards for divinatory purposes, because I kind of have a hunch that these cards might have been used for that. Because the cards tell a story, the pictures tell a story. They're deliberate, otherwise they would have just had 6 swords, or they would have had 6 cups or whatever, but they didn't. At any rate, until next time, friends, peace, stay well. Give me a thumbs up, a share, subscription, etc. Until next time, bye-bye.